for another day of life, and we ask that you will bless our ability to comprehend this sacred message as our brother Parminder will share with us, teach us today, and that also that we will go about our day thinking upon heavenly thoughts and these worthy truths to prepare us for the times that are coming before us as we are in the sealing time. We thank you always. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
Yesterday I think it was yesterday, we had a recap of Carchemish. Is that right? Yeah, it was yesterday. Losing track of time. And we saw that Carchemish becomes a symbol of what?
The time of the end?
Of the time of the end. Yeah, it becomes a symbol of the time of the end. 1798 and 1989. We saw that there was a battle between Assyria, king of the north, and this threefold union, and that between the two symbols of Carchemish there's a change of the king of the north, and we saw that that meant what? What did that mean? This transfer from Assyria to Babylon.
It's a different, it's still this kind of the same, but there's subtle differences between the two, just like there are subtle differences between the papacy and modern rule.
Yes. And Elder Jeff spoke yesterday when we were talking about that. There was another history that addresses this same passage, Daniel 11 verse 40, and I said that we wouldn't look at it. So I just want to briefly look at that today. I'm sure most of us are reasonably familiar with this, and this is in Revelation chapter 9. So we'll just have a brief overview of it for some people who may not be familiar with it, and then maybe on a different occasion we can go back to this just as a way of revision. All of us have read Revelation 9. We may not all be familiar with the intricacies of the chapter, but we've all at least read it. So let's just read verses 1 and we'll read verses 1 to 3. Bo, could you begin? Just one, and we'll...
And the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit.
And he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose smoke out of the pit, as the smoke of a great furnace. And the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit.
And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and unto them was given power as the scorpions of the earth have power.
Keep going.
Verse 4.
Okay. And it was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing, neither any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads.
So the chapter begins with this fifth angel. So hopefully the students I'm addressing. What is this fifth angel? Who is he? What does he represent? Islam. First woe.
Arabian Islam.
Arabian Islam. I want to try. I want to try and connect it with chapter 8 when it talks about the fifth angel. What? He's number 5, obviously.
One of the angels of the seals.
He's going to desolate Rome, papacy.
Okay, so these are one of the 7 angels that are brought to view in chapter 8. From chapter 8 to chapter 9, it talks about the 7 angels or 7 trumpets. Yeah, it's not the seals, it's the 7 trumpets. So if we read that, Revelation 8 verse 2. Who's next? Sister Alison, I think.
And I saw the 7 angels which stood before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets, judgments.
So we've got 7 angels with 7 trumpets, and someone said they're bringing destruction upon Rome. Yeah. So we see that there's this split between, in chapter 8, we haven't read the chapter, but that in chapter 8 there's 4 trumpets, and in going on to chapter 9 it talks about 3. I think at the end of chapter 8 it says in verse 13, someone can read verse 13?
Chapter 8, verse 13?
Yep.
Okay. And I beheld and heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, by reason of the other voices of the trumpet of the 3 angels which are yet to sound.
So we see that,
It's actually 2, right?
Actually,
Chapter 9.
yes, chapter 9's got 2 and then it goes into, maybe if I put chapters 9 to 11 here, and chapter 8. It's probably more technically accurate. So we see that these trumpets begin to do a work of destruction, and we're not going to go into all the history of this, but just as the background, these 4 trumpets are going to be brought against pagan Rome. And do we know what the 4 trumpets are? Who they are?
Barbarian tribes.
The barbarian tribes? Do you know any more detail than that?
Deliver one.
But the first is Alaric, the second Jezreel, third Attila the Hun, and fourth Odoacer.
So we'll go with the first one. Who's the first?
Alaric
And what nation is that? Because you're giving the name of the king.
was Alaric of the Goths.
So the first trumpet is the Goths.
Was it the Ostrogoths? Or
Yes. So people call them the Goths, but the Ostrogoths. The second?
The Vandals.
Vandals. Third?
Huns.
The Huns. And the fourth?
Sometimes they say Heruli. It's not sure.
So there's two opinions on this.
I read it's not
Yeah.
100% sure if it was Herula.
Is it I-H-U-R?
Heruli.
Let me just check.
You.
Yeah,
And-
U-L-I?
ULI.
So without addressing the Huns for the moment, what do we notice about these 4 trumpets in connection to Daniel chapter 7? These are the 3 horns that are plucked up. 3 horns that are plucked up are these 3 horns. And these trumpets are in the order 1, 2, 3 and 4. But what order are the horns plucked up in?
Is it opposite?
It's actually opposite. So there's a connection between Daniel 7 and Revelation 8 where these trumpets begin to punish pagan Rome, and at least at one level the issue of the plucking up of these horns is, if you like, a revenge that pagan Rome instigates to deal with these people, because the Huns, when they come and do their work, they end up just going back. They have an incursion into Europe and they go back to, I don't know what you call Mongolia, northern Russia, that type of area. Not northern Russia. Yeah. So why are all these trumpets coming? What's the purpose of these trumpets?
To scatter, to remove Rome, to destroy Rome.
So they're here to destroy Rome, and the reason they're here to destroy Rome is because sometime previous to this, Rome makes a Sunday law. And what's the history behind that? This is Constantine in what year? 321. So in 321, Constantine makes a Sunday law, and God begins to punish Rome for doing so, and he brings these 4 trumpets to destroy them. And by the time you've got to the end of this chapter, Rome has been broken up, and then you come to chapter 9. So I'm not saying chapter 9 begins in this particular year, but right here you have the year 538. So by 538 you have Europe in the situation that you've got the papacy, who's now sitting on his throne in Rome, and on the eastern part of the empire, who's ruling there in 538?
Constantine.
It's not Constantine. Constantine's right back here, 200 years before.
Justinian.
So this is Justinian. So Justinian is on the east, and this nation at Constantinople is going to be called in the future. Do we know what empire it's called?
Byzantine.
This is the Byzantine Empire. It morphs from pagan Rome into the Byzantine Empire, and on the west you've Byzantine. Someone can check it. I?
There's a Y on this.
BY. Yes.
Is that Byzantine?
Yes.
Okay. So on the west, you had these 10 horns, 3 of them were plucked up, and you've got 7 horns. So there are 7 horns on the west, papacy in the middle, and pagan Rome, the Byzantium Empire. It's not there yet in 538, are on the east. And so these horns here have dealt with Western Europe. They've dismantled the empire in the west, and now you've got the situation where you've got 7 horns on one side, the papacy in the middle, and pagan Rome on the east. Then in 538, when the papacy rises to the throne, it makes a Sunday law as well. Does anybody know where that Sunday law was spoken about, where it was rubber stamped? It was at a council. It wasn't Trent. It was in France.
What year was it?
538.
Really? I didn't know that.
I think it's in Orleans, but someone will check in a minute. Yeah, I don't pronounce it properly. So there's a Sunday law by pagan Rome, and 4 trumpets are going to come and destroy pagan Rome. When we talk about this destruction of pagan Rome, sometimes we think the whole nation just gets totally destroyed and it's not in existence after that. But really what it's doing, it's destroying the western part of the empire, or dismantling it. Then in 538, the papacy is going to make a Sunday law, and this Sunday law is basically just a reinforcement of this Sunday law. They're the same Sunday law. And because we understand they're the same Sunday law, we can line up this Sunday law with the Sunday law in the United States, and this Sunday law as the worldwide Sunday law at the end of the world. So there's a relationship between these 2 Sunday laws as they prefigure what's happening at the end of the world. Then when papacy makes a Sunday law, God's going to begin to punish them with the next 3 trumpets, which in 8:12, it's 8:13, it talks about them in relationship to the woes.
How would you find it on the internet under 538?
538 Sunday law. I think it's relatively
There's a
easy.
list of councils,
Yeah.
and it would be whatever council was in that year. And the
Is it a Justinian decree?
Sorry, what decree?
A Justinian?
no,
No, it's in France, and it's by the Catholic Church, and it's at this council that they basically rubber stamp and make further restrictions of this Sunday law. So this introduces chapter 9, and chapter 9 is going to deal with the punishment that's going to come upon the papacy because of the Sunday law that it's made. So what does that tell us about the trumpets? What's the purpose of the trumpets?
Yeah, it's Orleans.
Punish.
Council of Orleans.
So it was Orleans, yeah?
Third
Yep.
council.
Yeah. So there's a council in Orleans in France where they basically make this Sunday law. They bring it back into vogue, and they put additional restrictions on there. What's the purpose of the trumpets?
Punishment for doing that.
It's punishment for making Sunday laws. So a trumpet power is a punishment for making a Sunday law.
I've never heard of it before.
Sorry? The council.
I've never heard of it before, and I can't find it on the internet, so I would like that information.
Okay, someone's, I think Brother Tyler's found it. I don't know what.
Sunday string singing. Oh, amen.
Yeah. So,
It's a judgment too. Trumpet is a judgment.
yes, it's a punishment, a judgment upon Rome for making a Sunday law. And the Lord's going to expend 2 of these trumpets to deal with the papacy in this history. 2 of the trumpets are going to be used for this history. And if I just did that, and then we went to 10 to 11, we'd get the third and the last one, which is dealing with the history in which we're living. So this would be the first and second woe, and this is the third woe. So we just want to look at the first woe here, but we're really looking at the 5th trumpet. So after 538, you've got the situation where my graphic skills are not very good. I'm going to draw Europe as this box here, and the papacy is right in the middle, and you have 7 horns on the west, and you have pagan Rome on the east. That's what's happening in 538. The papacy has just made a Sunday law, and God's going to send the 5th, and then following that the 6th trumpet to begin to punish pagan Rome. Sorry, not pagan Rome, to punish the papacy. But the papacy now has got armies supporting it and giving it assistance. So, in order for these trumpets to begin to punish the papacy, it has to come against the army of Rome. So you see that there's a dynamic between a warfare between these trumpets, and all of us have obviously understood that this is Islam in its various guises as it runs through history, that these trumpets represent Islam, and there's this war in this history here, which is the 1260. This is the history of the 1260, which we don't often talk about, that there's a struggle going on between Islam and the papacy. But the reason we don't see that is because historically the warfare isn't between the papacy and Islam, it's between nation states and Islam. But if we see that pagan Rome here is an army of Rome, and we can see that from Daniel 11, only picking up the phrase, we're not going to see that it's actually pagan Rome. If we go to Daniel 11, verse 31, it reads, "An arm shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, they shall take away the daily, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate." So the only thing I want to pick up from that verse is not what the armies do for it, but that it has an army. So the papacy, when it comes to reign, has an army, and you see the same truth brought to view in Daniel chapter 8, verse 12. Can someone read, I don't know who's next, can someone read Daniel 8, 12?
It says, an host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered.
So in Daniel 8, it calls it a host, and Daniel 11, it calls it arms. So this host and arms are these nation states which are basically supporting the papacy. So when you look into history and you see the struggle between Islam and Europe, you see it warring against nation states, but prophetically the reason for that is that it's warring against the army of Rome, whose purpose, sole purpose really, is to protect the papacy. Now, before Islam can begin to attack, well, say the papacy, but it's going to attack the armies of Rome, it needs to get access to these powers. Now, in my really crude diagram here, I've sort of put Europe as a block, and if I were to draw the Mediterranean Sea like this, and this is North Africa, and we go into the Black Sea here. Can everybody see some kind of semblance of Europe here?
Definitely.
Okay, so this is North Africa. What you'll notice here, there are two pinch points here. This is the Atlantic, and these are called straits. When you get two land masses they almost touch, and they're still separated by a sea. They call them a strait. I think you spell it like this, without the E. It's just straight like that. So this is the strait. Does anybody know the geography? This is the Straits of Gibraltar. This is Spain here. Spain's down here. This is the Straits of Gibraltar, and this is the Bosphorus Straits. This is Turkey, as we understand it now, and Constantinople is right here. In fact, Constantinople today is on both sides. So this is the Straits of Gibraltar, and this is the Straits of the Bosphorus Straits, and Islam is here in the Saudi Arabian Peninsula. Islam is over here, and when we talk about Islam, this is the time period of Muhammad. This is the rise of Islam, and Islam is in this area here, and now its role is to come and punish the papacy for making a Sunday law in 538. So it needs to get from here over to here, and through this, and to attack the papacy. So it's got a lot of things to get through. But there's something that's stopping Islam from getting through, and this thing that's blocking it is the nation of Persia. What we don't want to get confused about is that we're now in the time of the papacy. We're right, without making it controversial, because we're looking at Daniel 2, we're right down here somewhere. And you know that the Persians were up here. And we talk about the Medes and Persians, then Greece, and then pagan Rome, and then papal Rome. But we still see that Persia is still in existence, it's still a nation, and it's residing in this area here. So even though it's come off the stage of prophetic history, it's still a nation state, it's still in existence.
I'm just trying to figure this out, because up here you said that pagan Rome was west, right? Or pagan Rome
Ask
was
your question.
west. So those four attack the west part of Rome, those four trumpets, but then on the map, pagan Rome looks like east and papal is west, or is, I don't know,
Okay.
I guess I don't understand what that is.
This and this, these seven horns, where do we get the imagery or the information about the seven horns? This is Daniel 7, yeah? There are 10 horns and 3 of them are plucked up.
Yeah.
And they're plucked up by the papacy.
Okay.
It says before whom 3 of them were plucked up, or at his behest. Those 10 horns, where were they in the vision of Daniel 7? They're on the head of the iron beast. Are we familiar with that? No?
It's okay.
Okay, if you read chapter 7, it tells you that they're on the... And I think you said the other day no one's spoken about Daniel 7, that's probably why you've got some of these issues, or lack of information. The horns, the 10 horns are on the head of this iron beast. And the iron beast is pagan Rome. So if the iron beast is pagan Rome, the 10 horns that come out of it, at one level, must also be pagan Rome. So you've got this situation where pagan Rome is this iron beast, and it's symbolised that 10 horns of it are part of, at least on one level, are part of pagan Rome, but at another level, they're 10 independent nations, and 3 of them are going to get plucked up.
Okay.
So at one level, all of this is pagan Rome.
Okay.
But what's being described by Revelation 8 and Daniel 7 is that once pagan Rome makes this Sunday law, it's going to receive punishment. And the punishment it's going to receive is the breakup or the dismantling of the empire.
Okay.
What we haven't spoken of is that soon after 321, in the year 330 AD, in the year 321 AD, the nation is a single entity, a single empire. Then Constantine's going to move the throne to Constantinople here,
Right.
9 years later.
Okay.
And that begins the demise of the nation. Yeah? National apostasy leads to national ruin. So once he moves, his empire is going to begin to be ruined. And it begins to be ruined when these powers see weakness in the empire, because he's moved from this place over to here. He set up a system where everything is still being controlled, but people see this as their opportunity to free themselves from the shackle of pagan Rome. And the people who are going to free themselves are part of the empire. All of this is the empire. So these 7 horns, the 10 horns, were all pagan Rome. They're all Roman states. But they're going to free themselves from pagan Rome. So that's what I mean when I use the term pagan Rome here. This is Justinian in this history, and he's still considered a Caesar.
Okay.
But the 7 horns now are all these 7 independent countries, and they're not at that level considered Caesars, but they're still considered at one level pagan Rome. So does that clarify that bit? So Persia's still in existence as a nation, and there's war going on between pagan Rome and Persia. They're at war, and they've been at war for a long time. So this leads us to Revelation chapter 9, verse 1 and 2. Yes, please do.
I guess I'm familiar with the 4 trumpets. I understand there are 4 parts that are taken down, but only 3 horns that removes. Is there a reason why there's 4 but only 3 removed?
The Huns, who's...
Oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
He had said it a minute ago, that the Huns came in and ransacked everything, and then they went back home. So they weren't there.
I don't understand the prophetic significance of the Huns in that sense, but the Huns weren't part of European geography. They were a nation that came and invaded Europe, and then once that invasion happened, they melted away and went back. But the other 3 powers, they were always part of Europe. They were part of the Roman Empire. The Huns never were. I don't understand the prophetic significance of that. In chapter 9 it says, "And the 5th angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven, and the earth unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit." So there's a key that's mentioned here, and a star. So we understand that star to be Muhammad? Is that what you're saying? Yeah?
isn't the star, because I think U.R. Smith says the star is Khosrow, the king of Persia, who fell, and his fall is what paved the way for the locusts to overspread the earth.
Does anybody else have that understanding?
Yeah, Uriah Smith talks about
Yeah.
that.
I'm saying, do we have that understanding?
Star is a messenger.
Yes, star is a messenger. A bad or a good.
My understanding was that it's Muhammad and not Khosrow.
Muhammad brought the message to Khosrow that he was going to be destroyed,
Yeah.
and it fulfilled exactly as he said.
Who do you understand the star to be, Brother Martha?
Say it again?
The
Yeah,
star,
Muhammad.
Muhammad. When you were just out, someone made the comment that Uriah Smith thinks it was Khosrow, the king of Persia. I think he says that, but I don't think we...
No.
No. I don't think so.
Okay, so maybe we'll park that for a moment because we're not in a total agreement with that. But there's this key. There's a key to the bottomless pit, and from my understanding, there's two pieces to this key. There's some information, and there's a battle. What's going to happen is there's this warfare that's been going on between pagan Rome and Persia for many years, and this warfare is going to come to a climax. And once this climax happens, one of these nations is going to be destroyed, and it ends up being Persia. Persia gets destroyed and basically fades away out of history, and this allows Islam to do its work. It's going to come up, take the territory of Persia, and begin to make war against the army of Rome in Constantinople. So this key and this battle are two parts of the puzzle that we need to understand. And on the chart here, it mentions the year 606, and it says the rise of Mohammedism. Right, this power stood not up against the Prince of Princes because it did not exist until the period, this period, and it quotes Revelation 9. So it says that this is the rise of Mohammedism. And so we've got the year 606. And what's happening in the year 606?
Muhammad was born.
I don't think he was born in 606.
No.
That's when he
Yeah,
started.
just-
606, he was
March.
born before
It was
this.
in a cave, yet is
Yeah, so he's in a cave, and there's various ways of spelling that.
Actually, that's not true. The pioneers gives us the 606 as he was marching. He was actually going into battle. That's
No.
when he began the year of
No.
battling.
This was
That
much
isn't
later.
true.
Okay, so are we okay with that spelling? I think there are various spellings.
Is it Haran?
Hira, Oh.
H-I-R-A, that's
H-I-R-A.
It's not Haran. It's not the same place that's Haran in Syria.
That looks better.
Hira.
Hira. There's this cave that he goes to, and he claims to receive visions from Gabriel on what to do. And the visions that he receives, at least part of that, is this information. He receives some information that he claims is from Gabriel, and the information that he receives is that he has a mission in life. And at least one of those missions is to come and fulfill the role of this trumpet. So he's been given a commission as he understands it. I'm not trying to say that Gabriel did come to him. In this cave, in 606, to come and make war against the papacy, to punish it. But it's not able to do that because Persia is blocking its way. So he has interaction with Persia and tells the Persians to basically take sides with them, this insignificant nobody nation, and join forces and make war against pagan Rome. The king of Persia, Khosrow, refuses that invitation. He says, I don't need you, I can fight my own battles. So he doesn't accept this invitation to join forces with Muhammad. So Muhammad just sits back and lets things happen. The reason he doesn't do that is because in the history that precedes this, Persia is in the ascendancy. Persia has been consistently winning this war that's been going on for a long time, and so it sees no need to get any assistance or help from these, marauding nobody tribes, because they're not even a nation state in this time period.
Did you say pagan Rome, or did you mean papal Rome?
The reason I'm saying pagan Rome is because it is papacy that they're going to come against, but they're going to start attacking the army of Rome.
Okay.
And the reason why I'm using that terminology is because if we look at today what's happening, you don't see anywhere in the news that Islam is making any kind of thrust against the papacy. Its thrust is against the West on one level, but specifically the United States, the way it deals with it. And without understanding this history, you don't catch the thread of why that's happening, because they're attacking the army of Rome, and the United States has now prophetically taken the role of the army of the papacy. So that's why I'm saying that they're coming to attack pagan Rome. There's no way they could ever get to the papacy, because the only way you're going to do it is through a land attack, and you have to get through this pinch point here in the Bosphorus Straits. So that's where their focus is. Now, I'm not trying to say Muhammad has this full overview of what's going on, but he knows he needs to come and do some work. So that's 606. So there's a key piece of information that he has, and that's why I understand that we're not in agreement with Uriah Smith about who the star is.
Yeah, I just read it. He does say the star is Khosrow's in the Keys about him. But I do see that, the star, star's a messenger.
Yeah.
That it makes more sense that it would be Muhammad.
I'm not so sure. I think it sounds like, but if you continue reading, he says immediately that Khosrow was reigning the world.
Let me read it.
I just read it, and it seems if you read longer, then he's actually coming to explain that it was Muhammad who subdued.
Okay.
I think this is how I understand this passage.
So, Brother Parminder, when it says in on 606 AD was the first dawn of Muhammad religious imposture occurred in the same year, what does that mean?
I didn't catch you, it was a bit fast, sorry.
AD 606, the first dawn of Muhammad religious imposture occurred in the same year. What does that mean?
This is when he begins to develop his religion. Just as Loyola Ignatius goes into a cave and develops his religion of the Jesuits, this is a similar situation that's happening here. When he goes away and hides himself, he's not just there for a short while. I think he's there on and off for a period of time, but it begins 606 that he goes away and has these ecstatic revelations of.
That's not what it's. I mean, you kind of deduct that from reading into it, but I've never been able to find on the internet that it specifically says. It actually gives it a few years later.
Yeah.
But pioneers, number one, it's on the chart.
Yeah,
So
no, I'm not denying that because
Yeah.
I've searched all the pioneers and I've gathered the information that it has on that day.
Mhm.
So I'm familiar with that. We're saying, but they also say that by the Edict of Focus constituted him universal bishop in AD 606. And they actually connect those two together, and they put on the 606.
Yes, there's a whole connection about the person that you've just mentioned, who's connected to pagan Rome, Constantinople. There's this whole interaction that's going on. It's not just the issue that he goes into a cave. There's this whole that other history that you've just brought to view, which I wasn't going to address. All I'm saying is that from 606 onward, he begins to receive information, some kind of divine revelation as he understands it, to begin to do his work. And part of that work is that he realizes that there's something going to go on in this history, and that the Persians should be siding with him for their own benefit. And his interaction with them is slighted and they don't accept that. Did you get anywhere further with that writing statement, or you didn't look? Okay. So there's a battle. We've looked at the information, and this is in 627, and this is the battle of. Yeah, this is the battle of Nineveh. Is it AH? Yeah, I think this is the battle of Nineveh. Is that correct?
I have one
Yeah.
question.
627, yeah. So in 627 there's this battle, and this battle is at the end of a war that's been stretching out for a long time, which sounds very similar to what? Carchemish. Yeah? So this sounds very similar to Carchemish. So what's happening is there's this war going on between these two nations, and the war that's preceding this, this battle here, the Persians have always been in the ascendancy. So the Persians have always been winning, hence they don't need the assistance of Islam. As you're approaching 627, pagan Rome, and I think the emperor is called Heraclius, is that how you pronounce it? Heraclius? Something like, it's something that goes like that. He comes up with a new strategy, and basically what he's going to do, he's going to come back against Persia suddenly and make a surprise attack. And if I understand the history correctly, he takes this long route all around the Black Sea and basically comes through the underbelly of Persia where they're not expecting him. And he makes an incursion into the land of Persia, and you eventually get to the situation where there's going to be a battle here at Nineveh. During this long drawn out war, both militarily and economically, both of these nations have basically spent all their resources, so they've become extremely weakened. But the pagan Rome eventually, in this battle, overcomes the Persians, routs them, and this ends the pagan Persian war. You can see that in history. That the battle itself ends this long drawn out war. Because pagan Rome had been so weakened by this long drawn out war, even though they take the whole territory of Persia, Islam begins to make incursions against them, and very quickly pagan Rome gets pushed back all the way back into Constantinople, and very rapidly Islam begins to take all this area that Persia owned. So soon after 627, Islam is right here, and they're at the doorstep of pagan Rome. So what you have is this situation. You have a long, drawn-out war between pagan Rome and Persia. And at the beginning of the war, Persia is in the ascendancy. At the end of the war, there's a sudden attack in 627 by pagan Rome, and they come into the ascendancy. But once that happens, a key is turned, and this key allows Islam, who have been bottlenecked in the Arabian desert, to come out and begin to do a work. So this key that was turned is the battle in 627. So when we think about this history here, we had Persia here, if you remember. And if you think of Islam being in a box with a padlock, it had been locked and held in here as long as Persia was bottlenecking and constraining it. But in 627, there's a key that comes. This is the Battle of 627. In connection with this information that he receives, when he's having these ecstatic revelations, the padlock is opened, the door is opened, and Persia comes off the scene, and then it says that this smoke rises up out of the bottomless pit. So that's this history, basically a brief overview of this history that's dealt with in Revelation chapter 9. And what does that mean to us? So let's go with this. There's a long drawn out war. And what we're going to do is we're paralleling this with Daniel 11 verse 40.
So if I reason from cause to effect when I'm looking at Islam, the pioneer says that basically in 606, that's when Muhammad started imposing his religion upon others.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the cause. The effect would be the fact that in 627 he was able to gather a large enough army to continue to do his work that he thought that God had given him to do.
Yes.
So really it all began in 606.
So when he begins to impose his religion, this is what he wants to do
Right.
with Persia. He wants to impose his religion upon them. He says, you become whatever he would explain it as. You become an Islamist. I don't know exactly what his concept of that was. The Persians refuse this, and then they lose this battle in 627. And he, remember, when we rub Persia off, Persia is still there, and even today there's this whole issue, this struggle between Persia and Islam, and they're all Muslims, but they still have massive differences between them. The long drawn out war. Daniel 11 verse 40. What are we beginning to see here? Just the long drawn out war bit first.
Is it Daniel 11?
Yes, in Daniel 11. We want to make application now of this, like we did with Carchemish.
What's the question?
There's a long drawn out war.
The Cold War, maybe.
So, where does the war begin in Daniel 11?
1798.
Begins in 1798, and who wins this war? Or who's in the ascendancy at that time?
King of the South.
King of the South. So we see that there's a long drawn out war that goes from 1798 to 1989. And we see that initially the King of the South is in the ascendancy. But we can go even into our own history, and we see that there's a struggle between the United States and the Soviet Union. And this is this long drawn out war that's been discussed in this history, and that parallels the history between the Soviet Union and the United States. So initially, as we've said, in 1798, Persia is in the ascendancy, but at the end, there's a sudden attack by pagan Rome, and this is what's been marked in 1989. So in 1989, there's a sudden attack by pagan Rome, which is just the army of the papacy. It's just the army of the papacy. And so this is the attack between, in the language of Daniel 11, the king of the north and the horses and the ships, which is the United States. And what does that allow to happen? It allows Islam to begin to rise and come on the scene of Earth's history. So it's from 1989 that we begin to see Islam come into the ascendancy once the Soviet Union has been out of the way, been put out of the way.
Perhaps it's good to remember that in 1989 the war from Russia against Afghanistan
Yes.
ended, right?
So we need to add that in, and maybe you could just give a bit more detail of that.
Well, in Afghanistan, we know that Osama bin Laden has started his how you say, his movement or his ministry. And it was Russia who was like holding the Mujahideen, the Afghanistan Islam back. But in 1989, by the intervention of the United States, sending arms to the Muslims, actually, they became so effective against the Russians that the war ended. And by this, I think the king of the south was dropped out of the war.
So we see here that we had Persia that was containing or bottlenecking Islam in this history, and in the 10-year war between the Soviet Union and the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, we see the same dynamic there, that they're containing or occupying or constraining Islam from coming up and filling the whole place with smoke.
I would say an observation is the armies of Rome that give Islam the ability to sort of rise. The armies of Rome, when they attacked Persia, gave Islam the ability to rise.
Yes.
And it was the armies of Rome who assisted Afghanistan and gave Islam the ability to rise.
So in this history here, you're saying that when pagan Rome destroyed Persia for its own purposes, what it inadvertently did, it allowed Islam to rise and come on the scene. And so that's what's happening in 1989. The United States are doing the same activity when they're supporting the Afghans in their struggle against the USSR, the King of the South. So you see this same dynamic going on. They get financially and militarily drained here. Islam comes on the scene from 1989, and then you get to the situation that the third woe is going to begin to blow from just a few short years after that, from 9/11 onwards.
It's perhaps a coincidence, but perhaps not, that it was 637 that Islam managed to conquer Persia, 10 years after the key was turned. So between the Battle of Nineveh,
Oh yes, 627.
it was 10 years later that Islam conquered Persia.
And there's a battle for that. I've forgotten the name of it. Have a look. There is a battle that goes on there in 637. I'll just see if it's on my note.
So what's your point? Why is
Just
it?
10 years. The 10 years that took between USSR and Afghanistan, and there's a 10 years between Muhammad and Persia.
Where's the 10 years in our time?
Yeah, where's the 10 years?
The 10-year war of Russia.
Oh,
Yeah, 10 year Warsaw, there was a 10 year.
the Balkan War.
Afghanistan.
Balkan War.
So that's a brief introduction to the second history, the second prophetic testimony, witness, that the way we understand Daniel 11 verse 40 is correct, because we say if this is part A and part B, that this is 1798 and this is 1989, and this is the time of the end, as is this. And maybe the other way I could draw it would be this way. I think we drew it out like this yesterday. This is 1989 to the Sunday law. This is 1844, 1798. The time of the end and the time of the end. And this was Carchemish. This was Carchemish. Which is a single, at one level it's a single war that's going on between these protagonists, and we're saying that you get this same history here, that there's this long drawn out war between these two powers when it's brought to view here between 1798 and 1989, and this Cold War that's being discussed here is between the United States and the Soviet Union, but here, and this is the army of Rome, and we know that the papacy is involved in that twofold alliance, and here it's between France and the papacy. And we'll put the papacy here as well. Here initially, this power is in the ascendancy, but when you get to the end, the United States with the papacy suddenly come on the scene unexpectedly and bring down the Soviet Union, who 10 years prior to this were in this warfare with Islam, constraining them and preventing them from rising. So here's the key that's turned in 1989. When the Soviet Union is taken out of the way, Islam is allowed to rise and begin to do its work. And then that by the time you get to 9/11, you have the Third World beginning. So they're the two arguments that I'm aware of that help us to defend that the time of the end in our history parallels the time of the end in the Millerite history. That I don't want to say that there's two time of the ends, there's a single time of the end, but it's this logic from Carchemish and Nineveh that help us to defend what we're teaching about this.
Are we saying Carchemish is a battle between the king of the north and the king of the south?
Yes.
Well, I thought Carchemish was a battle between Babylon and Assyria. Or
So,
Egypt. I don't know, I wasn't here.
I know you wasn't here. You'll have to watch the study on that. So it wasn't. Oh, ask one of the students because I didn't want to go through it again.
You don't have to go through. I
Yeah.
just want to know who was the armies that was
So
fighting in Carchemish.
Carchemish, it's Assyria against Egypt,
Okay, that'll do.
and here it's Babylon against Egypt. Is that correct? That's what. Yeah. Okay.
That's good for me.
So let's go back to Daniel chapter 8. We're looking at. We'll look at this again in some kind of review at another study. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me, Daniel, after that which appeared to me at the first. And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass when I saw, that I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in a vision, and I was by the river Ulai. So, am I okay to rub all this off? Yeah. What conclusions have we made so far?
The U line is the Euphrates.
So we've said that the Ulai is the Euphrates. I made one mistake yesterday. I think I said that the hiddicle is only brought to view in one place in Daniel 10:4, but it's actually in two places. It's also found in Genesis. You find the Ulai in two places, in Daniel 8, and you also find the hiddicle in two places. What else did we say? How do we know that? How do we know that the Ulai is the Euphrates? What was the logic that we developed to show that?
It says that the U line and Hiddekel are great rivers of Shinar.
Okay, so she says that the Ulai and the hiddicle are the great rivers of Shinar. And what is Shinar?
Another word for Babylon.
And Shinar is Babylon.
And another word for Babylon is Mesopotamia.
Mesopotamia. Is everybody reading their notes and they can see all this information? Yeah?
Genesis 10:9-10 will actually describe Shinar and Babylon. So you can make the connection with Shinar.
As it has spelled Mesopotamia, MESOPTH.
Tamia.
H.
P.O.
That doesn't look
No.
right.
Last time you spelled it MESOPHMAMI. PHAMI.
MESOPOT.
Okay, I'll just leave it here. For Mesopotamia.
Actually, I think Mesopotamia is the region, yeah, the geographical area.
Yes,
And it's not Babylon in this sense, but it's Babylon is the state, the nation, right?
yes. But the reason we pick up Mesopotamia
Yeah.
is why. Do you remember, Brother Marco, why we pick up the word
It
Mesopotamia?
means it's the land between two rivers.
That's right, yeah. Because this means the land between two rivers.
But you say it's not
It's the geographical area.
between the two rivers.
Yeah. Any nation can be settled there. It's not-
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't define Babylon itself. And we've got two rivers coming like this, and they're going to join here, and you're going to come to the head of the Persian Gulf. Babylon is here, and Nineveh is here. And so this must be the river Euphrates, which must be the river Ulai, and this is the Hiddekel, which is the Tigris. How do we know the Hiddekel is the Tigris? Strong's Concordance tells us that. And by using this logic, we can work out from the Spirit Prophecy statements that the Ulai and Hiddekel are the great rivers of Shinar. This is Babylon. This is Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers. Hence, we know that this is the Euphrates.
Sorry, what means N?
Nineveh, sorry.
Okay.
I just put that just for reference. This is where Nineveh was, and this is where Babylon was.
Can you just repeat the last sentence? Hence we know it's Euphrates.
Because we know it just says the Ulai, and remember we said what kind of language, or what
Persian.
This is Persian. And so when commentators have looked at this passage, they said, oh, it's the Persian river next to Shushan, and Shushan is in the district of Elam, and Shushan is here. This is Shushan. And today Shushan is in Iran, and this is Iraq. This is Iraq and Iran. Because it's connected to Shushan, they've looked and they've tried to find a river that's here. And there is a river by the city of Shushan, and they said, oh, this must be Ulai because it's a Persian name. But there's no way of actually going back and defining that wherever the river is called there today actually goes back to Ulai. But we've said that Ellen White says that we noted that she says the great rivers of Ulai and Hiddekel, which were in the land of Shinar, it's this passage here that gives us the key to know that the Ulai is the Euphrates. When we see this statement, she talks about the great rivers of Shinar. Shinar is Babylon. So the Hiddekel and the Ulai are the great rivers of Babylon. And then we noted that it's also Mesopotamia, which is the land of two rivers. And these are the two great rivers of Babylon. This river here is only a minor tributary, and some people say that they even just dug a canal there to provide water for the city of Shushan. So the Ulai cannot be this small tributary or man-made canal that's in Shushan. It has to be dealing with the great rivers of Babylon. So we found Hiddekel from just a word search. You can get this from Strong's, and Euphrates we get from the logic that this Ellen White statement. Does anybody know what the reference was for that? Was it a manuscript?
10 manuscript releases.
16.
16.
16.
16.
3, 3, 4.
3, 4.
3, 3, 4.
3, 3, 4. So,
So what was the significance of that?
What-
That utilize the Euphrates, what are we producing for that?
at least on one level, commentators are arguing that Daniel is in Shushan, and when he's in Shushan, he would be by a river, because there's a river right next to Shushan. So, if it would be like if we were here and there's a stream that's passing by, and I'm saying I'm here in the building, and I'm just by the banks of the river. They want to get everything all at the same place, because it all becomes neat and tidy then. But what we're seeing is that, and we still haven't resolved all of the intricacies of this, is at one level he's here in the palace at Shushan, and at the next level he's by the river Euphrates somewhere. So he's having a vision here and here at the same time. And we can't prove it, but I suspect, I think we might actually be able to prove it, but at this level we haven't, that I think he's in Babylon by the river Euphrates, and this vision is connected to this city and this city at the same time. So there's this disconnect between the information in verse 2. Does that make sense? Yeah? Where we're going to end up leading to is that we think we're going to see that when he says he's in Shushan the palace, he's not really there. And the likelihood is he's actually here by this river in real life, and he's going to receive a vision while he's here, but also he talks about him being there at the same time. So we want to see what the connection is. So the way I'm reading verse 2 at the moment is he's in Babylon, he's by the river Euphrates, and he has a vision. But when he has this vision, he sees himself at Shushan at the same time. So it's that disconnect there.
Is that how you spell correctly the Tigris River? Tigris?
Probably not.
Yes.
Tig.
Yes, yes.
It is? Oh, okay. I just assume my spelling's always wrong. The reason why also it's important to see this, because where do we notice the Tigris and the Euphrates? If we go for the first usage, the first time it comes up in Scripture.
But the word Tigris doesn't come in there. I cannot find it in scriptures.
It's in Genesis.
He said
Strong's. He said the Strong's.
How do you spell Tigris in the Bible to find it?
T-I-G-R-I.
Probably different.
Is it different?
You find Eula, you find Hiddekel, you find Euphrates, but I have never find Tigris in the Bible.
Maybe it's not.
Maybe I'm missing something.
You kept saying something about it was in between two rivers.
Yes, that's the in between two rivers is the statement that we just read from 16 MR, and maybe I missed it. I thought we could derive that from Genesis chapter 2. Have you noticed that as well, Brother Dwayne?
I thought so.
So did I.
2:11, the name of the first is Tyson.
No, it's not there. Not Tigris.
They have different names.
It's under a different name because
Right,
that's how you
right.
spell it.
Hiddekel and Euphrates, it says Hiddekel in 2:14.
Yeah. What is it?
In German it spells Tigris.
Oh yeah. Sorry, it's Genesis 2:14. Hiddekel. That's where we're picking it up from.
Yeah.
Sorry, you threw me there for a minute.
Tigris.
So it mentions the Euphrates, Genesis 2:14, and the name of the third river is Hiddekel. That is it which goeth toward the east of Assyria, and the fourth river is Euphrates. So it mentions there. It mentions that it's on the east of Assyria. The Hiddekel.
I understand what you're trying to say, but see, Ulai and Euphrates, they're both in the Bible with the exact names.
The Ulai and Euphrates.
Hiddekel, it's only under Hiddekel, but
Yes.
they don't have no
In other
connection with
languages
Tigris.
we have some translated as...
So we don't have the Tigris. I understand what you're saying, but there's identifying remark.
Right.
Like for instance, it's the east of Assyria. Yes, Was that the only point you were making?
Yes, and I was
Yes.
just wondering why, because Uli and Euphrates is under, especially under prophetic visions. Hiddekel and Tigris is not. Is there a specific?
So the point that she's making is that it mentions these two names in Scripture, but it only mentions the Hiddekel. It doesn't mention the Tigris. I don't know.
The Septuagint introduced the expression Tigris. That's what I got here at Strong's.
Okay, so in the Septuagint it says Tigris.
Yes.
Okay.
Better known as Tigris, the Septuagint equivalent, that's what it says.
Okay.
I just noticed that in Genesis 2:14, or it starts in verse 11, it describes 3 rivers there. And it says in 2:14, and the name of the 3rd river is Hiddekel.
Yeah.
Does it make
So there's 4 rivers that's brought to view
Yeah.
here. And all I'm saying is that...
Does it make a difference? I don't know. Because we're describing the 2 great rivers of Shinar. And Hiddekel is described as the 3rd.
Hiddekel is the 3rd and the Euphrates is the 4th. That's what it says,
Yeah. So
I think it does. I'm suggesting it does without looking in it at any more detail at the moment.
So what's the Uli? Or are we saying the Uli is just the Hiddekel? I mean, the Uli is just the Euphrates?
Yes.
Is that what we're saying?
Yeah.
So why has the Bible said one is a Uli and one is a Euphrates if it's the same thing?
Uli is the Persian name. Isn't it?
Uli is the Persian name. That's the point that I think we're bringing up, because we're getting directed that even though the vision's given here, our minds need to be taken to Shushan. So that's the first thing that we looked at. And what else did we talk about yesterday? What other points did we bring up? We spoke about the 3rd year of Belshazzar. Yeah, we tackled that yesterday as well.
yeah, about the 3rd or the 12 or 15 period, the long and short period.
So, Sister Tanya sent us, I think, let me check, I think it's the passage that you sent us. Where does it say that? Yeah, this is letter 51A, 1897. This is letter 51A, 1897, and I think she's emailed it to everybody, I think. What we see here, we read, so this is letter 51A, 1897, July the 8th. Admitted to a share in kingly authority and power at 15 years of age, Belshazzar glorified in his power. So, one thing that we notice is that he was only 15 when he came to power, and the other thing that we noticed, it says in a later paragraph, it says Belshazzar had been given many opportunities for knowing and doing the will of God. He had seen his grandfather Nebuchadnezzar banished from the society of men. He had seen the reason and intellect in which the proud king glorified taken away by the one who gave it. He had seen the king driven from the kingdom and made the companion of the beasts of the field. And just one last point. Paragraph 15. The history of his grandfather stood out as vividly before him as the writing on the wall. He gazed at the burning letters which no mortal power could evade. The reason why I've just read those 3 paragraphs is if you look at both the pioneer chronology and the secular chronology, I don't think it's in agreement with the Spirit of Prophecy text. If we read it as if we take it as written, she says, so I don't know how you read this, she said this, he had seen his grandfather Nebuchadnezzar banished from the society of men. So how would you read that?
What, in terms of his age?
Yeah, I've read that he actually saw his grandfather banished. He was there when his grandfather was banished. He was alive.
He obviously witnessed the 7 times.
Yes.
Yes, and then it says he had seen the reason and intellect in which the proud king glorified taken away from the one who gave it. He had seen the king driven from the kingdom. So all I'm saying is he sees all of this, and he's only 15 years when he comes to the reign. So his first year he's 15, and by the time you get to the third year he's only 18. If you look at the way the pioneers get that chronology, and I think Uriah Smith is the one that details it, and all the historians, they will put Nebuchadnezzar, and when he comes off the throne, a number of years before Belshazzar is even born, I think. So all the chronologies that we have don't line up with these Spirit of Prophecy quotes. So if anybody's watching, or any of us delve into this, I don't know how to resolve this issue, but all the information that we have from the pioneers doesn't match up with this statement. So it's a really really important statement, that is.
I'm sorry, where is that statement from?
It's the reason you probably haven't seen it is it's part of the unpublished material.
I sent it to everybody.
You have it on. It's been emailed to you.
No.
It's letter 51A, 1897. Letter 51A. So all I'm saying about that piece of information is it just adds another layer of complexity, that the information that we have from the pioneers and from secular history doesn't match up with the inspired word of God. It's a lot shorter history than that we used to. We said that William Miller, when he looks at the history of Belshazzar, and I still want to try and print this off so that we can read it, William Miller is going to give a long reign for Belshazzar. I think it's 15 years he gives. And so we'd have this situation here. We'd have 15 years, 12 and 3. And this is where Belshazzar... Sorry, no, not that way. The other way.
Parminder,
Yes.
I found in Alonso's writing where he talks about the fact Belshazzar was either slain in his third year or very shortly after that.
Yes, and I want to print those statements off so that we can read them together. So I'm just summarising at the moment to say that this is Miller. Miller says this. From what I've seen so far, Haskell, Jones, Wagner and Uriah Smith, they all give a short reign. They all say it looks like this.
Yesterday you said Smith.
I'm going to tackle this issue, yeah, because I noticed this as well. So the 15 years is for Nabonidus, who is his father, and then he co-rules at the end. So this is Belshazzar. So what I'm saying is this. When William Miller looks at this, he says that Belshazzar reigns for a length of time, and then we would pick up Daniel chapter 8 here in the third year of his reign, and there's still a number of years to go after that. But all the pioneers look at it the other way. They say that his father reigns for 15 years, and then Belshazzar reigns for the last part. Before I just tackle this issue, if Nabonidus, his father, reigned for 15 years, it's in contradiction to the Spirit of Prophecy quote that we just read. It contradicts that, because she says that he was alive when he saw his grandfather go.
Are you talking Belshazzar or the father?
So let me rephrase that. Even the pioneers talk about his father reigning for a certain amount of time. I think it's around 15 years. And he's only 15 years when he comes here. So he would only been either a baby or not even have been born by the time his grandfather came off the scene.
So you're using wrong words, because Nebuchadnezzar was the son of Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar was the grandson. Are you making reference to Belshazzar?
Maybe I'm using the wrong word. What I'm saying is this. Nabonidus, I don't know if that's how I pronounce it.
That's the son of Nebuchadnezzar.
No, Nabonidus.
That's Belshazzar's father.
Yes.
Yeah. So if Nabonidus is reigning for 15 years,
Yes.
and he reigns only for 3 years, and he's only 15 when he comes to the throne.
What Belshazzar is?
Belshazzar's 15 when he comes to the throne. Nebuchadnezzar is back here. And most historians give a number of kings in between this. So this is Nebuchadnezzar. And Nebuchadnezzar is going to die here. And if we take even the way the pioneers run this chronology, that it's in disagreement with the spirit of prophecy, because the spirit of prophecy says that he was alive back here. And if he's 15 here, he must have been born before Nebuchadnezzar before Nebuchadnezzar dies. And the numbers just don't stack up, Brother Dwayne.
There's one other little thing I've noticed, that besides this discrepancy, there's another discrepancy in the visions of Daniel 8 and Daniel 9 as far as their chronology, in terms of when these kings were in their own chronology. Daniel's having his vision, according to Usher, in 553 in Daniel 8, and Daniel 9 is 538.
Yeah.
And that's 15 years difference.
That's where I get this 15 years.
Right. Now, the other issue is that when you read the old version of Daniel and Revelation, it gives you these numbers.
Okay.
Right? But when you read the 1936, 1944 edition of Daniel and Revelation, they say that there's only 1 year between the two visions. So instead of 15 years, they say there's only 1 year.
So Miller gives this long chronology.
And I think Miller's correct.
All the other pioneers give a short chronology. They say that the third year, it looks like this. He's right at the end. Uriah, I don't have all the original copies of Daniel Revelation, but the ones that are on the CD-ROM, the one that's on the CD-ROM, initially Uriah Smith has this chronology. He puts him back here. Then in the 1863 prophetic keys to the chart, he switches back to this one, and then later on in another document he switches back again. So from my reading of Smith, he starts here, goes here in 63 and comes back again later on. So Uriah Smith is giving varying dates.
The first, you said the first version of Daniel and the Revelation is before 1863?
I'd have to check the date. That's not correct, is it? Yeah.
No, that's not.
Yeah.
What did he say?
He said that
Let me check what I'm
Smith
saying.
first had the short version, and then in 1863 the long version, and then he switched back to the short version.
So
But,
we're talking about the book Daniel Revelation when it was revised.
well, the thing is, Daniel and the Revelation did not exist before 1863, so if that, as far as I know. So that was causing trouble in my mind.
There are articles.
Yes, yeah. In 18, so he starts off with this position, and then he switches. So he starts off with this position in, I think it's in 1864, which with the prophetic keys, and then he switches back in Daniel Revelation to here.
Oh, okay.
So in Daniel Revelation, he's given this one, but in the keys book, he's giving this one. So the question is this one correct or is this one? And I'm leading to, I don't know. I think we're leaning to this one, to be frank, that it's to do with here, but it causes problems with this chronology. It wouldn't do, because it gives you much more time, because he's 15 here, so you've got 15 years to play with, because you haven't lost all this time that's in between. So we still need to grapple with that.
But then we have to, I see your point, because then we have to marry up the statement from Sister White.
Yes.
There was a short space of time between Daniel 8 and Daniel 9, very short space.
We read that yesterday. It says, this is from March 14th, 1907, Review and Herald. In the 4th year of Jehoiakim, is this the right one? I think it's the right one. In the 4th year of Jehoiakim, very soon after Daniel was taken Babylon, Jeremiah predicted the captivity of many of the Jews as their punishment for not heeding the word of the Lord. The Chaldeans were soon to be used as instruments by which God would chasten his disobedient people. Their punishment was to be in proportion to their intelligence and to the warnings they had despised. The whole land shall be a desolation and astonishment, the prophet declared, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years. And it shall come to pass, when 70 years are accomplished, that I will punish the king of Babylon and that nation, saith the Lord. No, that's not it, is it? you remember the passage that we read yesterday?
Yeah.
Not a short time.
Yeah.
Short space.
It's not the March 14th. I think it's the March 21st.
Yeah, it's.
Is it short spade or short
I
period?
think short.
It's paragraph 3 or 4.
Short time.
Yeah, paragraph 3.
March 21.
March 21. I was reading March 14. These were the prophecies of the 25th chapter of Jeremiah, are the letters and the records that Daniel the prophet, during the first year of his reign of Darius the Mede, prayerfully studied 60 years and more after they were written. Daniel was familiar with the circumstances connected with Jeremiah's testimony, given very soon after the beginning of the Babylonian captivity. So this is being discussed in discussion of Daniel chapter 9, the first year of Darius. That's the context of this passage. He well knew that the promise of the return was sure, and yet a short time before Daniel 9 verse 1, in the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, the angel of the Lord had instructed him in vision. So that's where we pick up this idea that Ellen White is given a very short, well, she says a short time between Daniel 8 and Daniel 9. So I think it's important that we resolve this issue. Is the 3rd year of Belshazzar back here with years after the demise of Babylon, or is it right at the end here? Let's close with prayer.
May I suggest that?
Oh, yes.
To resolve your conundrum with Sister White's statement. She may not have been making a chronological statement when she said a short time. She may not have been designating a 15-year period or a 2-year period or a 3-year period. She just might have said it as a statement of just a short period of time. If she doesn't give you the time, you can't read into it that she's in disagreement with Miller's chronology or the other chronologies. She's just making a statement, a short space of time. A short space of time, 15 years compared to a century is a short space. 2 years to 15 years is a short space. So if she hasn't given you a definitive number, what can you read into it is what I'm saying. What can you read into it?
Yeah, and that's the dilemma that we're facing.
Right.
Is what do we read into that?
Right.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your loving kindness and goodness towards us. As we grapple through these truths, we ask that you would continue to direct our hearts and our minds to your word, that we might come to a resolution and begin to unlock the truths that you have kept secret for millennia, and that now you are desirous to reveal to your people. Be with us and bless us, Father, as we go through this work day. May we meditate upon your word, we pray and ask in the name of Jesus. Amen.